Hi there, and welcome to Israel Explained Operation in the West Bank edition. So, Israel has launched a significant operation in the West Bank today. And interestingly enough, that operation seems to have been sort of consensual, launched with a Hamas escalation and an Israeli escalation, both sort of pre planned with the beginning of the ceasefire in Gaza. So, Hamas spokesperson Abu Obeida said that now that the war in Gaza is over, from his perspective at least, they believe that it's over. The war is going to move to the West Bank. And he called on people there to escalate and pursue a war there. They're aided by a significant increase in popularity of Hamas in the West Bank. Now, polls during the war showed that popularity of Hamas in Gaza has gone down, but popularity of Hamas in the West Bank had gone up because the people in the West Bank obviously did not have to live with the consequences of this horrible war. And the release of the prisoners that's coming now, they are making Hamas much more popular because the prisoners are a very big issue for Palestinians, not dissimilar from how the hostages are a very important issue for Israelis. Meanwhile, the IDF has sent in a lot of troops, mostly the Kfir Brigade, into Jenin, and that operation that has started is going to be a far reaching one. My guess is it will last through the first phase of the ceasefire, and it's happening for both military reasons and for political ones. In As we will discuss, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir both demanded a large operation in the West Bank so that they would stay as part of the packages that they demanded to stay during the ceasefire. That didn't work with Ben Gvir for various reasons, but for Smotrich, the package, which includes but is not limited to this operation in the West Bank, managed to keep him in. So there's a political element here as well. Herzi Halevi, the IDF chief of staff, announced his resignation today. He'll still be in charge until March. And some people believe, including veteran correspondent Ron Ben-Ishai, that one of the reasons Herzi Halevi is leaving his post is because he believes that there's too much political interference in the conduct of the IDF, and that this operation uh, is another indication of that. So he might think that the operations that are going on now are too political and that he's finished his job in the major operation, which was forced on Israel following October 7th. Indeed, um, Smotrich said, after Gaza and Lebanon, with the help of God, we began changing the concept of security in Judea and Samaria as well, with a campaign to eradicate terrorism in the region. This, as part of the war goals added by the cabinet to the religious Zionist demands on Friday. End quote. So Smotrich is saying very clearly that his party demanded this operation, and now they're getting this operation, showing that there's a political element as well. Of course, there's also a security element. There have been a lot of terror attacks coming out of the West Bank. The PA has tried to operate against terrorism in the West Bank, most notably in Jenin. Jenin is a city that the PA does not control. 5 members of their security forces were killed in the operation. The operation wasn't a complete failure in the sense that some terrorists were killed, some terrorists were arrested, but it wasn't enough to really make a dent in the control of the terrorists over Jenin. And it looks like the PA has understood that it wouldn't be able to make that dent on its own. There have been ceasefire talks, amazingly enough, between the PA and the terrorist organizations over some sort of partial PA control in exchange for some kind of calm, something like that. According to Ohad Chemo of Channel 12 in Israel, those talks were advancing quite well when Israel started its operation. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the ceasefire talks would have benefited Israel. Probably not. They probably would have seen the terrorist organizations continue to run Jenin. But Israel didn't take those talks into account. Now, Israel is using purely military means in order to try to establish calm in the West Bank, but that will fail. Actual calm in the West Bank, which may be unattainable, don't get me wrong, but if you wanted to pursue it more seriously, would involve, of course, a military component. You can't expect there to be an end of terrorism coming from Jenin and other cities in the West Bank without a military component, but it can't only have a military component. It would also have to involve strengthening the PA as the counterweight to Hamas and other terrorist organizations because they've shown that they're not capable of dealing with this on their own, even when they try. And second, to stop the constant attacks on settler attacks on Palestinian villages that are currently occurring throughout the West Bank. Not only is Israel not taking steps to stop that, they're taking steps to exacerbate that. Israel has stopped executive detentions against settler terrorists. It hasn't arrested anyone for recent riots. And even Donald Trump has removed, at the request of Israel, some of the sanctions on settler terrorists. So all this has encouraged settler terrorism, and that destabilizes the West Bank significantly. So the military operation is not going to be able to stabilize the West Bank. Um, the impetus behind it may end up being one of purely destruction without rebuilding, which is what we saw in Gaza and what has quite clearly failed to restore stability in Gaza, to replace Hamas in Gaza. And once again, just like in Gaza, this policy of destruction first without rebuilding or any political horizon is being driven by political concerns from Bezalel Smotrich and, at least until recently, and possibly again in the future, Itamar Ben-Gvir and the survival of Netanyahu. Okay, so that is the end of this episode of Israel Explained. If you like what I do here, consider supporting me on Patreon at Shael Media, and consider listening to my History of the Land of Israel podcast. Thank you.